The morning sun peeked through the tall glass windows of Westwood Studios. The light bounced off the shiny marble floor and the large metal logo behind the reception desk. Jake Miller adjusted his tie for the 5th time that morning. He had been working at the front desk for only 3 weeks. Every day he tried to show his bosses that they had made the right choice in hiring him. Jake was 26 years old with brown hair that never seemed to stay in place and eyes that showed both hope and worry. He had moved to Los Angeles with big dreams. He wanted to work in movies, not as an actor or director, but in the business side of things. Getting this job at Westwood Studios was his first step. It wasn't much, just answering phones and greeting visitors, but it was a start. "Remember, Jake, security is our top concern," his boss had told him on his first day. "No one gets past you without proper identification and an appointment. No exceptions." Jake took these words very seriously. Maybe too seriously. The morning had been difficult. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. A group of angry writers had shown up for a meeting that had been canceled. The coffee machine behind his desk had broken, spilling hot water everywhere. And now, the computer system was running slow, making it hard to check the day's appointments. At exactly 11:42 a.m., the glass doors opened. A man walked in wearing a baseball cap pulled low and dark sunglasses. He had on a simple gray jacket and blue jeans. Nothing fancy. He looked like he was in his 70s or 80s, with lines on his face that told of a long life. He walked, with a straight back, moving with purpose toward the reception desk. Jake looked up from his computer. The system had just crashed again, and his patience was wearing thin. "Can I help you?" Jake asked, not bothering to hide his frustration. The man nodded. "I'm here to see David Marshall." David Marshall was the head of the studio, someone Jake had seen only twice since starting his job. Jake forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And do you have an appointment with Mr. Marshall?" "Yes," the man said simply. His voice was low and rough, like gravel. Jake looked at his computer screen and clicked the mouse a few times. The system was still frozen. "Name?" he asked with a sigh. The man paused for a moment. "Eastwood." Jake typed the name, but nothing happened. The computer just showed a spinning circle. "The system is slow today," he explained. "I'm not seeing any Eastwood on the list. There should be an appointment." "For 11:45, the man said. Jake was getting more annoyed. He had dealt with people like this all morning. People who thought they were important, people who thought rules didn't apply to them. "Sir, without an appointment in the system, I can't let you in. Studio policy." "Maybe you could call Mr. Marshall's office," the man suggested calmly. Jake felt his face getting hot. The phone lines were jammed, his computer wasn't working. And now this old man was telling him how to do his job. "Look," Jake said, his voice rising slightly. "I don't know who you think you are, but we get people walking in here all day claiming they have appointments with Mr. Marshall. Do you have any idea how important he is? He doesn't just meet with random people off the street." The old man's expression didn't change. He stood there, still and quiet, looking at Jake from behind his dark glasses. "Do you have proper ID? A studio pass? Anything?" Jake asked, though. His tone made it clear he had already decided the answer. "Not with me," the man admitted. Jake let out a dramatic sigh. "Then I can't help you. You need proper credentials and a confirmed appointment. I suggest you call Mr. Marshall's assistant and reschedule. Maybe next time don't show up looking like you're trying to hide from someone." He added this last part with a small laugh, trying to lighten the mood but instead sounding mean. The man was quiet for a moment. Then he slowly reached up and removed his sunglasses. His eyes were intense, narrowed slightly, as they focused on Jake. Something about those eyes made Jake uncomfortable. They looked familiar somehow. "I understand," the man said. "You're just doing your job." There was no anger in his voice, just a calm acceptance that somehow made Jake feel worse than if the man had yelled at him. The man put his sunglasses back on and turned to leave. As he walked toward the door, a woman rushed in. She was carrying a stack of papers and looked out of breath. "Mr. Eastwood," she called out. "I'm so sorry I'm late to meet you. The traffic was terrible." The man stopped and turned. The woman hurried. To his side, still catching her breath, Jake felt like someone had poured ice water down his back. Eastwood, Clint Eastwood, one of the most famous actors and directors in Hollywood history, the man who had made dozens of classic films, the man who had won multiple Academy Awards. And Jake had just treated him like an unwelcome stranger. "Mr. Eastwood, I see you've already tried to check in," the woman said, glancing at Jake with confusion. She was Sarah Johnson, one of the executive assistants. "Is there a problem?" Before Clint Eastwood could answer, another man burst through a door behind the reception desk. It was David Marshall himself, the head of the studio. He was a tall man with silver hair and an expensive suit. "Clint, you're here," Marshall said with a big smile. He walked around the desk and extended his hand to Eastwood. "We've been looking forward to this meeting for months." Jake wanted to disappear. He wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. Marshall looked at Jake, then back at Eastwood. "I hope my new receptionist has been taking good care of you." There was a moment of silence. Jake held his breath. This was it. This was the end of his career before it had even started. Clint Eastwood was going to tell everyone how rude Jake had been, how he had basically called him a nobody, how he had questioned his importance, but Eastwood just nodded. "No problems," he said simply. Marshall looked relieved. "Excellent. Come on back to my office. We have so much to discuss about the new project." As Marshall led Eastwood and Sarah toward the elevators, Eastwood looked back over his shoulder at Jake. There was no anger in his expression, just a look that seemed to say he understood what it was like to be young and make mistakes. The elevator doors closed and Jake collapsed into his chair. His hands were shaking, sweat dripped down his back. He had just insulted Clint Eastwood, the Clint Eastwood, and somehow, for some reason, Eastwood had chosen not to get him fired on the spot. Jake's phone rang, making him jump. He answered it with a trembling hand. "Reception desk. This is Jake," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Jake, this is Linda from HR," said the voice on the other end. "Can you come to my office as soon as possible? We need to discuss an incident that just occurred." Jake's heart sank. "Yes," he whispered. "I'll be right there." As he hung up the phone, Jake knew his short career at Westwood Studios was probably over. But more than that, he felt a deep sense of shame, not just because he might lose his job, but because he had been so disrespectful to someone who hadn't deserved it. Someone who, despite Jake's rudeness, had shown him kindness by not complaining. Jake stood up, straightened his tie one more time, and prepared to face the consequences of his actions. Whatever happened next, he knew he would never forget this day. The day he insulted Clint Eastwood and immediately regretted it. Jake walked slowly to the HR office. Each step felt heavier than the last. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever. Pictures of famous movie posters lined the walls. Many of them were for films that Clint Eastwood had starred in or directed. Jake could feel the eyes of Eastwood's characters watching him as he passed. Linda Chen, the HR manager, was waiting for him. She was a small woman with a serious face and black-rimmed glasses. Her office was neat and organized, with everything in its place. She pointed to the chair across from her desk. "Sit down, Jake," she said. Jake sat. His hands were sweating. He wiped them on his pants. "Do you know why I called you here?" Linda asked. Jake nodded. "Because of what happened with Mr. Eastwood." Linda looked at her computer screen and clicked her mouse a few times. "Let me tell you something about Clint Eastwood," she said. "He is not just another celebrity. He is Hollywood royalty. He has been making films for over 60 years. He has won Academy Awards. He is respected by everyone in this industry." Jake stared at the floor. He felt sick. "And Westwood Studios has been trying to get him to direct our new film for months," Linda continued. "Do you understand what that means? This could be the biggest project this studio has had in years, a $100 million project." "I didn't know who he was," Jake said quietly. "He was wearing sunglasses and a cap." Linda took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "That's the point, Jake. In this business, you never know who might walk through those doors." Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, whether they're Clint Eastwood or the person who delivers the mail. Jake nodded again. He knew she was right. The appointment was in the system, Linda said. But there was a glitch when we updated the software last night. All appointments between 11 and 12 were not showing up. Jake felt even worse. It hadn't even been Eastwood's fault. The mistake had been on the studio's side. So what happens now? Jake asked. Am I fired? Linda put her glasses back on. That would be the normal response in this situation, but something unusual has happened. Jake looked up, confused. Mr. Eastwood didn't complain about you, Linda said. In fact, when Mr. Marshall asked him directly if there had been any problem at reception, Mr. Eastwood said no. He covered for you. Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. But why would he do that? Linda shrugged. I don't know, but it gives you a second chance that you don't deserve. Jake felt a small spark of hope. Maybe he wasn't going to lose his job after all. However, Linda continued, word has already spread through the studio about what happened. Everyone knows you turned away Clint Eastwood at the door, and Mr. Marshall is not happy about it. The spark of hope died as quickly as it had appeared. You'll be moved to the mailroom for now, Linda said. Away from the public, we'll review your situation in 2 weeks. Jake nodded. The mailroom was a step down, but at least he still had a job. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, Linda replied. Thank Mr. Eastwood for not making a big deal out of this. Jake left the HR office feeling a mix of emotions. He was grateful that he hadn't been fired, but he was also deeply ashamed of how he had acted. And he was confused about why Clint Eastwood hadn't complained about him. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Jake cleaned out his desk at reception and moved his few personal items to a small corner in the mailroom. His new supervisor, a man named Ray, showed him how to sort the mail and which departments got which types of packages. So you're the guy who insulted Clint Eastwood, Ray said with a smirk. That's going to follow you for a while. Jake didn't respond. He just focused on learning his new job. By the time Jake left work that evening, the story had grown. Now people were saying that he had yelled at Eastwood, that he had called him an old man, that he had told him to get lost. None of it was true, but Jake didn't bother correcting anyone. He just wanted the day to end. Jake's apartment was small and cheap, located in a noisy part of the city. He lived alone with just a few pieces of furniture. On his wall was a poster for a film school he had hoped to attend one day. That dream seemed very far away now. He made a simple dinner of ramen noodles and sat on his couch, thinking about everything that had happened. How could he have been so rude? Why hadn't he recognized Clint Eastwood? And most puzzling of all, why had Eastwood protected him? Jake turned on his TV and flipped through the channels. And then he stopped. There was a Clint Eastwood movie playing. It was one of his westerns, Unforgiven. Jake had never seen it before. He decided to watch. As the film played, Jake found himself drawn into the story. Eastwood played a former outlaw who had changed his ways but was pulled back into his old life for one last job. The character was tough but fair. He had a strong sense of right and wrong, and he gave people second chances when they deserved them. Jake watched the whole movie. When it was over, he sat in silence for a long time. He thought about Eastwood's character in the film and how it might reflect the real man. Maybe that's why Eastwood hadn't complained about him. Maybe he believed in second chances. Jake's phone rang. It was his mother calling from Ohio. He hadn't told her about his new job yet. He had been waiting until he had been there longer, until he had something to be proud of. "Hi, Mom," he answered. "Jake, how are you? How's the new job?" his mother asked, her voice full of excitement. Jake thought about lying, about telling her everything was great, but he couldn't do it. "I messed up, Mom," he said, his voice cracked. "I really messed up." He told her everything, how rude he had been, how he hadn't recognized one of the most famous actors in history, how he had been demoted to the mailroom. His mother listened without interrupting. "Oh, Jake," she said when he finished, "that doesn't sound like you at all. You've always been such a polite boy." "I know," Jake said. "I was having a bad day, but that's no excuse." I was wrong. Well, what are you going to do about it? His mother asked. Jake thought for a moment. I don't know, he admitted. What can I do? The damage is done. You can apologize, his mother suggested. That's what I always taught you to do when you make a mistake. Jake sighed. Mom, this is Clint Eastwood we're talking about. I can't just walk up to him and say sorry. Why not? His mother asked. He's just a person like anyone else, and it sounds like he's a decent person who already gave you a break. I bet he would appreciate an apology. Jake knew his mother was right. He should apologize. But how? He didn't even know if Eastwood was still at the studio. And even if he was, how would Jake get anywhere near him? He was stuck in the mailroom now. I'll think about it, Jake told his mother. Thanks for listening. After they hung up, Jake couldn't stop thinking about what his mother had said. An apology was the right thing to do, but it seemed impossible. Then, just as he was getting ready for bed, Jake's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sarah Johnson, the executive assistant who had been with Eastwood at reception. Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m., room 202. Mr. Eastwood wants to see you. Jake read the message 3 times to make sure he wasn't imagining it. Clint Eastwood wanted to see him. Why? Was he going to complain after all? Had he changed his mind about getting Jake fired? Jake couldn't sleep that night. He kept playing different scenarios in his head. None of them ended well for him. By morning, he had convinced himself that his career was truly over. Jake arrived at the studio an hour early the next morning. He had barely slept. His eyes were red and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He had put on his best shirt and tie, the ones he had worn to his job interview. He wanted to look professional for his meeting with Clint Eastwood, even though he was sure it would end badly. The studio was quiet at 8 in the morning. Only a few early workers moved through the hallways. Jake went straight to room 202. It was on the 2nd floor in the executive wing of the building. He had never been there before. He stood outside the door, his heart beating fast. He was too nervous to sit down, so he paced back and forth in the hallway. At 10 minutes to 9, Sarah Johnson appeared. She was carrying a tray with 2 coffee cups and a small bag from a bakery. She looked surprised to see Jake already there. "You're early," she said. Jake nodded. "I couldn't sleep." Sarah gave him a small smile. "Relax. It's going to be fine." "How do you know?" Jake asked. "Why does Mr. Eastwood want to see me? Is he going to complain to Mr. Marshall himself?" Sarah shook her head. "If Mr. Eastwood wanted to get you fired, you'd already be gone. He's not like that." She balanced the tray in one hand and opened the door with the other. "Come in and wait. He'll be here soon." Jake followed her into the room. It was a small meeting room with a round table and 6 chairs. There was a large TV on one wall and windows looking out over the city on the other. Sarah put the tray on the table. "Sit down," she said. "Try to breathe." Jake sat. He tried to take deep breaths, but his chest felt tight. "Why is he doing this?" Jake asked. "Why didn't he just complain about me yesterday?" Sarah sat across from him. "Mr. Eastwood is different from most people in Hollywood. He's been in this business for a long time. He's seen it all. He doesn't sweat the small stuff." "But I was rude to him," Jake said. "I basically told him he wasn't important enough to see Mr. Marshall." Sarah smiled. "Trust me, Mr. Eastwood knows how important he is. He doesn't need a young receptionist to tell him." They sat in silence for a few minutes. Jake looked at the clock on the wall. It was exactly 9 o'clock when the door opened and Clint Eastwood walked in. Jake jumped to his feet. Eastwood looked different today. He wasn't wearing a cap or sunglasses. He had on a simple blue shirt and khaki pants. Without the disguise, Jake couldn't believe he hadn't recognized him yesterday. The lined face, the narrowed eyes, the slight frown. It was a face known all over the world. "Good morning," Eastwood said. His voice was quiet but clear. "Good morning, Mr. Eastwood," Sarah replied. She stood up. "I brought coffee and some pastries. Will there be anything else?" Eastwood shook his head. "No, thank you, Sarah." That will be all for now." Sarah nodded and left the room, closing the door behind her. Now Jake was alone with Clint Eastwood. He had no idea what to say or do. Eastwood sat down at the table and pointed to the chair across from him. "Sit down, son." Jake sat. His legs felt weak. "Coffee?" Eastwood offered, pushing one of the cups toward Jake. "Thank you," Jake said, though he was already so nervous that more caffeine was probably a bad idea. Eastwood took a sip from his own cup. He looked at Jake with those intense eyes. "So you're the young man from reception?" Jake nodded. "Yes, sir. My name is Jake Miller. And I want to say how very sorry I am about yesterday. I didn't recognize you, but that's no excuse for how I spoke to you. I was rude and unprofessional, and I'm truly sorry." The words came out in a rush. Jake had been practicing his apology all night, but now it sounded hurried and not enough. How could any apology be enough? Eastwood listened without changing his expression. When Jake finished, he nodded slowly. "Apology accepted," he said simply. Jake blinked. Just like that? Eastwood's mouth twitched in what might have been a small smile. "What were you expecting? That I'd make you beg? That I'd yell at you? That's not really my style." "I don't know what I was expecting," Jake admitted, "but I thought you'd be angry." "I've been in this business for over 60 years, Eastwood said. "If I got angry every time someone was rude to me, I'd have had a heart attack a long time ago." He took another sip of his coffee. "Everyone has bad days. Everyone makes mistakes." Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. Maybe this wasn't going to be as bad as he had feared. "But," Eastwood continued, "how you handle your mistakes, that's what defines your character." Jake nodded. "I understand, and I promise it won't happen again." "I know it won't," Eastwood said, "because you learned from it. That's what matters." They sat in silence for a moment. Jake took a sip of his coffee. It was good, much better than the cheap coffee he usually drank. "I heard they moved you to the mailroom," Eastwood said. Jake looked down at the table. "Yes, sir." "Is that what you want to do? Work in the mailroom?" Jake shook his head. "No, sir. I want to work in production. I want to learn how movies are made. The business side of it. But I have to start somewhere, and now I'm lucky I still have a job at all." Eastwood was quiet for a moment, studying Jake's face. "How old are you, son?" 26, Jake replied. "And you came to Hollywood to work in movies." It wasn't a question, but Jake nodded anyway. "I was about your age when I got my first break," Eastwood said. "I had been doing small roles, bit parts. Then someone gave me a chance at something bigger. Everyone needs that first real chance." Jake wasn't sure where this was going. Was Eastwood just making conversation? "I'm starting a new project next month," Eastwood continued. "Right here at Westwood. That's what the meeting with Marshall was about yesterday. We're making a film about a father and son. It's a small film by Hollywood standards, but it's important to me." Jake nodded, listening carefully. "I need someone on set," Eastwood said. "A production assistant. Someone who can learn how things work from the ground up. It's hard work. Long hours. Not glamorous. But it's a real start in the business." Jake's eyes widened as he realized what Eastwood was suggesting. Are you offering me a job?" Eastwood shrugged. "More like an opportunity. 2 weeks on my set. You'll be getting coffee, making copies, running errands. But you'll be seeing how a real film is made. You'll be learning." Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. "But why would you do that for me? After how I treated you?" Eastwood looked at him with those serious eyes. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, and because how you handle this second chance will tell me a lot about who you really are." "I don't know what to say," Jake said. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "Don't thank me yet," Eastwood replied. "Like I said, it's hard work, and I expect everyone on my set to treat each other with respect, no matter who they are or what job they do." Jake nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I understand." "Good," Eastwood said. He stood up. "Report to Stage 5 next Monday at 6 a.m. Don't be late." Jake stood up too. I won't be, I promise. Eastwood walked to the door, then stopped and turned back. One more thing. This isn't charity. If you don't work out, you're gone. Clear? Crystal clear, Jake said. Eastwood nodded and left the room. Jake stood there, not moving, hardly breathing. Had that really just happened? Had Clint Eastwood, the Clint Eastwood, just offered him a job on his film? After Jake had been so rude to him? It didn't make sense. But Jake wasn't going to question it. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. A real chance to learn the movie business from one of the greatest filmmakers ever. He wasn't going to waste it. Jake left the meeting room feeling like he was walking on air. People in the hallway looked at him strangely. He realized he was smiling like a fool, but he didn't care. For the first time since the disaster at reception, Jake felt hope. He had 5 days until Monday. 5 days to prepare for his new job. 5 days to learn everything he could about Clint Eastwood and his films. 5 days until his life would change forever. Jake pulled out his phone and called his mother. "Mom," he said when she answered. "You won't believe what just happened." Monday morning arrived quickly. Jake was at stage 5 by 5:30, 30 minutes early. He hadn't slept much the night before. He was too excited and too nervous. He had spent the weekend watching Clint Eastwood films and reading everything he could find about the famous actor and director. Jake wanted to be prepared. Stage 5 was one of the largest sound stages at Westwood Studios. When Jake arrived, it was already busy with activity. People were moving lights, building sets, and setting up equipment. No one seemed to notice Jake, standing by the door looking lost. "You must be Jake," a voice said. Jake turned to see a woman with short gray hair and a clipboard. She was in her 50s and had a no-nonsense look about her. "Yes, ma'am," Jake replied. "I'm Maggie, the production manager," she said. "Mr. Eastwood told me to expect you." She looked Jake up and down. "Ever worked on a film set before?" Jake shook his head. "No, ma'am." Maggie nodded as if this was what she expected. "Stick with me. Don't talk unless someone asks you a question. Watch, listen, and learn. Got it?" "Got it," Jake said. Maggie turned and walked quickly into the busy stage. Jake followed, trying not to bump into anyone or anything. He felt very out of place in his cheap button-up shirt and khaki pants. Everyone else was wearing jeans and t-shirts. "First rule of being a PA," Maggie said over her shoulder, "is to be invisible until you're needed. Second rule is to be ready for anything." Jake nodded, though Maggie wasn't looking at him. He had no idea what a production assistant was supposed to do, but he was eager to learn. Maggie stopped at a small table covered with paper cups, coffee pots, and pastries. "This is the craft table," she explained. "Keep the coffee fresh, make sure we don't run out of cups, simple enough?" "Yes, ma'am," Jake said. "Stop calling me ma'am," Maggie said with a frown. "Makes me feel old." "Maggie is fine." She handed him her clipboard. "Here's the call sheet for today. It tells you who's supposed to be where and when. Mr. Eastwood likes to start on time, so if someone on this list isn't here, you let me know." Jake took the clipboard and studied the paper on it. There were dozens of names, many of which he recognized as famous actors. His eyes went wide. "Focus, kid," Maggie said, snapping her fingers in front of his face. "This isn't a fan club. It's a job. Treat everyone the same, no matter who they are. That's how Mr. Eastwood does it." Jake nodded quickly. "Yes, Maggie." For the next 2 hours, Jake kept the coffee fresh and checked names off the call sheet as people arrived. He tried to be invisible just as Maggie had told him, but he couldn't help watching everything that was happening around him. The way the camera crew set up their equipment, the way the lighting team adjusted the lights, the way the set designers made last-minute changes to the set, which looked like the inside of a small house. Clint Eastwood arrived at exactly 8 o'clock. He walked onto the set quietly, nodding to people as he passed. He was dressed simply in jeans and a blue shirt, similar to what he had worn at their meeting. There was no big announcement of his arrival, no special treatment. He was just another person coming to work. Eastwood saw Jake by the craft table and walked over. "Morning, Jake," he said. "Good morning, Mr. Eastwood." Jake replied, trying not to sound as nervous as he felt. Everything good so far? Eastwood asked. Jake nodded. Yes, sir. Everyone on the call sheet is here. Eastwood looked pleased. Good. Stick with Maggie today. She knows everything about making movies. He picked up a cup of coffee and walked away to talk to the camera operator. As the morning went on, Jake's job changed from moment to moment. 1 minute he was making copies of script changes. The next he was holding a light reflector for the camera crew. Maggie kept him busy, showing him how things worked and introducing him to different crew members. This is Jake, she would say. He's learning the ropes. People were nice to him, which surprised Jake. He had expected Hollywood types to be rude or stuck up, but everyone was just doing their job, focused on making the movie as good as it could be. By lunchtime, Jake was exhausted but thrilled. He had learned more in one morning than he would have in a week of classes at film school. And the best part was watching Clint Eastwood work. The famous director was calm and focused. He knew exactly what he wanted, but was also open to suggestions from the crew and the actors. He spoke quietly, never raising his voice, and everyone listened to him with respect. During lunch, Jake sat alone at a small table, eating a sandwich from the catering truck. He was taking notes on everything he had seen that morning when someone sat down across from him. It was one of the lead actors, a young man who had been in several big action movies. You're the new PA, right? The actor asked. Jake nodded, surprised that the actor was talking to him. Yes, sir, I'm Jake. The actor laughed. Drop the sir stuff, I'm Tom. He took a bite of his salad. So how'd you get this gig? Usually Clint uses the same crew for all his films. Jake hesitated. Should he tell the truth? That he had been rude to Clint Eastwood and somehow ended up with a job instead of getting fired? Before he could decide what to say, another person sat down at their table. It was Clint Eastwood himself. Mind if I join you? Eastwood asked, though he was already sitting. Not at all, Tom said. I was just asking Jake here how he got the job. Eastwood looked at Jake with that slight twitch of his mouth that might have been a smile. Jake and I met at reception, he said. He made quite an impression. Jake felt his face turn red. Was Eastwood going to tell Tom the whole embarrassing story? But Eastwood just took a bite of his sandwich, then changed the subject. How's your father doing, Tom? He asked. I heard he was in the hospital. As Tom talked about his father's health, Jake realized that Eastwood wasn't going to share his secret. The famous director was protecting him again, just as he had done with Mr. Marshall. Jake felt a rush of gratitude. After lunch, filming began. Jake watched in amazement as the actors performed their scenes and Eastwood directed them with small, specific suggestions. A little softer on that line, he might say. Or, try it again, but think about what your character really wants. Maggie kept Jake busy with various tasks, but she also made sure he could see what was happening on set. You're here to learn, she told him. So watch how Mr. Eastwood works. There's no better teacher. By the end of the day, Jake was more tired than he had ever been in his life. His feet hurt, his back ached, and his head was spinning with everything he had seen and learned. But he was also happier than he had been in a long time. This was what he had come to Hollywood for. This was the real thing. As the crew was packing up for the day, Clint Eastwood walked over to Jake. What did you think of your first day in the movie business? He asked. Jake couldn't hold back his smile. It was amazing, Mr. Eastwood. Thank you for giving me this chance. Eastwood nodded. You did good today, Jake. Be here tomorrow, same time. I will, Jake promised. As Jake was leaving the studio, Maggie stopped him. Mr. Eastwood doesn't do this often, she said. Do what? Jake asked. Take someone under his wing, Maggie replied. I don't know what your story is, but he must see something in you. Don't waste this opportunity. I won't, Jake said. I promise. Jake walked to his car, tired but happy. 1 day down, 13 more to go. He was determined to make every one of them count, to learn everything he could, to prove to Clint Eastwood that his faith in Jake wasn't misplaced, and most of all, to show that he wasn't the rude young man from reception anymore. He was someone better, someone who deserved this second chance. The 2 weeks on Clint Eastwood's film set passed faster than Jake could have imagined. Each day brought new experiences and lessons. Jake worked harder than he ever had before. He was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. He did whatever job needed doing without complaint, whether it was getting coffee for the actors or helping move heavy equipment. By the end of the first week, Jake had learned the names of everyone on the crew. By the middle of the second week, many of them were asking for him specifically when they needed help. Even Maggie, who rarely gave compliments, told him he was not half bad for a beginner. But the best moments were the small conversations with Clint Eastwood. Sometimes during a break in filming, Eastwood would call Jake over and ask his opinion on a scene. The first time it happened, Jake was too surprised to speak. "Well?" Eastwood had asked. "What did you think of that take?" Jake had stammered something about it being good. Eastwood had frowned. "Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me what you really think. That's the only way you'll learn in this business." After that, Jake had tried to be honest. He would say things like, "I think the actor seemed nervous in that scene," or "the lighting makes it hard to see his face when he turns." And to Jake's surprise, Eastwood would listen, and sometimes even make changes based on his comments. On the final day of Jake's 2 weeks, Eastwood was filming a key scene between the father and son characters. It was an emotional moment where the father finally tells his son how proud he is of him. Jake watched from behind the camera, holding his breath. The scene was so powerful that he forgot he was on a movie set. When Eastwood called cut, Jake had tears in his eyes. During the lunch break, Eastwood found Jake sitting alone, still thinking about the scene. "What did you think?" Eastwood asked, sitting across from him. "It was perfect," Jake said honestly. The way the father couldn't say the words until the very end, and the look on the son's face when he finally heard them. It felt real. Eastwood nodded. "That's what we're always trying to do in movies. Make things feel real even when they're not." He looked at Jake for a long moment. "Your 2 weeks are up today." Jake felt his heart sink. He had been trying not to think about that. These 2 weeks had been the best of his life. He didn't want them to end. "Yes, sir," he said. "I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. I've learned so much." "What's next for you?" Eastwood asked. "Back to the mailroom?" Jake nodded. "I guess so, unless they've already filled my position." Eastwood was quiet for a moment, thinking. "You know, Jake, when I first started in this business, I played a lot of small roles. Westerns, mostly. Some people thought that's all I could do. But I knew I wanted more. I wanted to direct, to tell my own stories." Jake listened carefully. He had come to understand that when Eastwood shared a personal story, there was always a reason for it. "It took years," Eastwood continued, "and a lot of people told me to stick to acting, that I wasn't cut out to be a director. But I didn't listen to them. I knew what I wanted. And you became one of the greatest directors of all time," Jake said. Eastwood gave a small smile. "The point is, if you know what you want in this business, you have to go after it. No one is going to hand it to you." Jake nodded, though he wasn't sure what Eastwood was trying to tell him. "So what do you want, Jake?" Eastwood asked. "Really want?" Jake thought about it. "I want to work in production. I want to learn how movies are made from the ground up. Eventually, I'd like to be a producer." He smiled a little. "I know I have a long way to go." Eastwood nodded. "At least you know what you want. That's more than most people." He stood up. "We're finishing up early today. Come to my office at 4. We'll talk about what's next." For the rest of the day, Jake couldn't stop wondering what Eastwood wanted to talk about. Was he going to offer him a permanent job? Or was this just a goodbye meeting? Jake tried not to get his hopes up, but it was hard not to. At exactly 4 o'clock, Jake knocked on the door of Eastwood's office. It was a simple room with movie posters on the walls and a desk covered in scripts and notes. "Come in, Jake," Eastwood said. He was sitting behind the desk, reading something on a piece of paper. Jake sat in the chair across from him, waiting nervously. Eastwood put down the paper and looked at Jake. "I've been watching you these past 2 weeks," he said. You work hard, you listen, you learn. Those are rare qualities in this business. Thank you, sir, Jake said. I talked to David Marshall this morning, Eastwood continued. Told him I wanted you to stay on the film until we finish shooting, as a regular PA, with regular pay. Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. You want me to keep working on the film? Eastwood nodded. It's another 6 weeks of shooting, not a long job, but it's a start. And if you do well, there are other films after this one. Jake felt a rush of excitement. Mr. Eastwood, I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me, Eastwood said. This isn't a favor. It's a job offer. You earned it. Jake nodded, trying to stay professional even though he wanted to jump up and down with joy. I won't let you down, he said. I know you won't, Eastwood replied. Now there's one more thing. He pushed a small envelope across the desk. Open it. Jake picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside was a check, a very large check. Jake looked at the amount and his eyes went wide. What is this for? He asked. It's your bonus for the 2 weeks, Eastwood said. Everyone on the crew gets one. Jake looked at the check again. It was more money than he had made in the last 6 months. I can't accept this, he said. You've already done so much for me. Eastwood's eyes narrowed slightly. It's not charity, Jake, it's what you earned. Taking less than you're worth doesn't help anyone. Jake nodded slowly, understanding. Thank you, he said simply. You're welcome, Eastwood replied. Now go tell Maggie you're staying on. She'll act like she's not happy about it, but she is. She told me yesterday you're the best PA she's had in years. Jake left Eastwood's office feeling like he was walking on air. 6 more weeks on the film, a real job in the industry, and a future beyond. That if he worked hard, it was more than he had ever dreamed of. As he walked through the studio, Jake passed the reception desk where everything had started. Linda Chen from HR was talking to the new receptionist, a young woman who looked nervous, just as Jake had been on his first day. Linda saw Jake and waved him over. Jake, I heard the good news. Mr. Eastwood wants you to stay on the film. Jake nodded, still not quite believing it himself. Yes, he just told me. Linda smiled. I have to admit, when he first suggested moving you to his set, I thought he was crazy. But he said he saw something in you. Jake looked at the new receptionist, who was watching them with curious eyes. Everyone deserves a second chance, he said, repeating Eastwood's words from their first meeting. The important thing is what you do with it. Linda nodded. Well, you certainly made the most of yours. As Jake walked away, he thought about how much his life had changed in just 2 weeks, from the mailroom to a real job in film production. All because Clint Eastwood had seen past his mistake and given him a chance to show who he really was. Jake made a promise to himself right then. Someday, when he was in a position to help someone else, he would remember this lesson. He would look past their mistakes and give them the same kind of chance that Eastwood had given him. Because that was what Jake had learned from Clint Eastwood, beyond all the filmmaking knowledge. He had learned that true greatness wasn't just about talent or success. It was about how you treated people. It was about seeing the best in them, even when they didn't see it in themselves. And that was a lesson Jake would never forget.